Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today myself, Matthew Fox, J. Scotty St. Clair, and Brian V. Klein are all coming to you from an undisclosed secret rebel base on J-19 as we're talking to you about the first episode of The Bad Batch, the new Star Wars show that has just come out on Disney+. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew, your host. As I said, by happy circumstance, myself, Jay Scotty, and Brian are all here. Zuhair Ali will be joining us for a lot of episodes on as we talk about The Bad Batch, but he couldn't be with us. But today, the three of us were here. We got to just watch the first episode of The Bad Batch. We actually watched it last night, but there were different levels of sobriety, so we watched it again this morning. And I think we're just super excited about it and excited to be bringing you this coverage. So let's just kind of start with overall thoughts. Jay Scotty, you start. What'd you think of this?
Absolutely blown away. You know, coming off those 4 episodes, I alluded in our primer that I don't have the biggest exposure to the animated side of the Star Wars universe, but man, I was absolutely enraptured in everything that was going on, completely blown away by the action and the emotional through line that seems to be so present. So I'm excited to see where the show goes.
Definitely. And honestly, I think one of the greatest things we have about this group is we all come at this from very different levels of knowledge. You know, Jay Scotty, you're a huge fan, but you've seen mostly the movies, not too much of the TV shows.
Sure.
I'm someone who's seen almost everything on screen, but I haven't necessarily gone quite as deep into the books and a lot of the deeper lore and stuff. And then our other guest today, Brian V. Klein, you're basically a walking Wikipedia for Star Wars. So, I like that we have the three
I've been
different...
called worse, yeah.
And
I take it as a compliment.
And that's part of the point, is that we want this show to be, whether you are a diehard Star Wars fan, or whether you've just seen it, or even if, you haven't seen the show, but you want to just stay up to date with it because you're excited for what's going to happen, what you can learn about the universe, all you are welcome here. So, Brian V. Klein, your other folk, what do you think about the show today?
I echo J. Scotty's sentiment. It was mind-blowing to think there was a number of times when we were watching it and going, this is an animated show? I mean, the level of detail and just, it's mind-boggling. But even that, the story and just the way... we'll get into it, but how they actually started the episode off, the timeline part, and how it's meshing, and they're showing scenes from a different angle that we've seen before, but it's just, it's a great start.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I have to admit, I was nervous about this. We've seen some wonderful content coming out with the Mandalorian and all of that. The new stuff that's coming out looks exciting. The Bad Batch, as you said, Jay Scotty, was a great set of characters introduced in the most recent season of Clone Wars. The Clone Wars overall, I love it, but had its ups and downs, and especially sometimes it could be a little bit more juvenile. I saw the droids on screen, and I tensed up. I was like, And honestly, and I know I keep joking about this, the fact that we never heard the words Roger, Roger, were to me such a, okay. The droids were a little bit funny, there's a little bit of comic relief with them, which is fine, but I was so sucked in. The animation was amazing, but I had to really look for it the second time, because the first time I was just so drawn in by the stories and the character, and I want to do a kind of quick plot summary in a second, but let's just all take a moment, pour one out for Mr. D. Bradley Baker, because if you told me I would watch a TV show where the 2 most emotional, important scenes were entirely done by one guy talking to himself in 5 different accents, I'd go, you're nuts.
Yeah.
But those scenes of the Bad Batch debating, discussing, are they still part of the Empire? How do they feel about Order 66? With the big differences, his voice acting just blew me away.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal.
It's crazy what the amount of talent that guy has, and it's been present because he's been doing it for years and years, and just his resume. But even in this, he has such a diverse, for all clones that are all supposed to be the same, like you said, you got them, and even when there's the other regular clones, different voice and just different inflection and timbre. It's amazing.
Because I'd seen it already and was sober last time and remembered it well, I did an experiment for one of the scenes and I looked away and I could always tell exactly who was speaking.
Oh yeah,
which is to me just such talent.
Yeah.
So let's give kind of a quick plot summary. Let me
good.
kind of do a quick shot at it and then you all can fill in what I missed. Although we're not going to go too deep in the details. We want to stick to mostly just kind of the plot and character and also keep this relatively short. So we start with the Bad Batch, who's a bunch of clones that we've met, in earlier episodes. The Clone Wars are still going on. and they're on a battle, and we get to see the
Then the planet of Collar.
Collar, yes, thank you. And during the battle, at first it looks like the Jedi want reinforcements. The clones are in not a great space, and the Bad Batch just come in, kick ass. Everyone's just show off their cool abilities.
Yep.
They fight really well, and it turns out they were brought to us by a young Jedi Padawan named Kalen Jarrus.
He's Caleb Doom at this time,
right?
As a Padawan to Depa Billaba,
who, if you've not seen Star Wars Rebels yet, becomes a very important character in Star Wars Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's great to see just a little bit of his backstory, and we'll definitely get into that more.
Sure.
So the Bad Batch are heroes, and then just during the fighting, we realize that they think that the war is almost over because General Kenobi has just engaged General Grievous on Utapau.
Yep.
So we know that this is like the final battle from Rise of Revenge of the Sith, so the war is coming to an end.
Right.
So they're called back to Kamino. The war is over. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, my main important thing there.
Yeah, you jumped a little bit.
Yeah. And so actually, while they're kind of going off on a new mission with Caleb, we find out that the regular clones get told, execute Order 66. We see it happen again. We see Caleb's master, because he's a Padawan at this point, get killed by the clones.
Yeah.
In what actually looked like a hard battle, which I was glad. Like, she didn't die easy.
Right,
No.
right.
And I'm glad, too, they didn't show that. I mean, they inferred it, they said it, but they're keeping this from being that level of intensity and stuff. So she's dead, but you don't see her death on the screen.
And one of the things you clearly see, which I think is going to be very relevant for his character later, is that she dies in part because, she's so busy warning him to stay away.
Yeah, she takes that first shot in the shoulder when she's giving him the direct order to get out of there. Yeah.
And I think there's no reason, I don't think this is legitimate, but I think it's pretty clear that a 10-year-old boy would watch that and now have all this guilt of, she died for me.
Certainly.
So anyway, Caleb is now with them, and the Bad Batch all hear about Order 66, and most of them think, well, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Let's find out more what to do.
What it is, yeah.
Right.
Except for one of them, Crosshair. Yep. And Crosshair he thinks that they should kill the Padawan, and there's some fighting. He at one point says, good soldiers follow orders.
Yes.
Which is very much like a quote from the soldiers with that. They try to kill Caleb, or he tries to kill Caleb, and Hunter lets Caleb get away, and then lies to Crosshair about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to way too much detail here, but so anyway, they all get back to Kamino, where they're made from the clones, and there's tension between them and the regular clones. They meet up with someone named Omega, who is a young girl, a young human female, who has an accent and facial features that make her look an awful lot like one of the clones, just in female form. Right. There's tension between them and the clones. We get to watch Emperor Palpatine's big speech about organizing the Empire. And you just see the tension growing within them of Crosshair thinking they should have killed the Padawan, everyone else thinking this Order 66 stuff doesn't make sense.
Right.
They go through this great combat training thing that's a reference to earlier combat training stuff, where they get a show off for Admiral Tarkin just how cool and badass they are, and he's impressed. But he clearly has doubts about their loyalty. So he sends them off on a mission to, as he describes it, go kill a bunch of insurgents. It turns out that it is a few insurgents, because it's Saw Gerrera, who we've met already in the Clone Wars, and for those of you who've seen Rogue One, obviously he comes in there.
Yep.
But he's with women and children and refugees. And Hunter and the rest of them decide that they don't want to try and kill this group, but Crosshair is again very upset about it. They have more conversations and realize that they've been talking about how that there are five actual wrong clones, and that Echo, who's been traveling with them, isn't one of them, but that Omega is.
Right.
And so we get that realization. We get more discussion about why maybe the Order 66 isn't working for them, because they know about the chip and things like that. We go back to Kamino. They try to break out Omega. They get caught, arrested. More conflict and trying to decide what to do. And Crosshair being very clear that he's not okay with any of this. And Crosshair winds up being taken by Tarkin to have basically the chip that controls his compliance for Order 66 strengthened.
Right.
Yeah.
Our heroes then, without Crosshair, try to break out. And in one of the final scenes, while they're trying to break out, Crosshair is the one who leads a group of clones trying to stop them.
Yes.
And very tense fighting. Happily, none of them wind up killing each other, but obviously it's a very sort of emotionally wrought moment. And then they finally are able to go off get on a shuttle with Omega. They get to escape. And in the closing scenes, they say, well, where are we going to go? well, we know a guy on J19. And mass speculation about what world J19 starts, and then
the guy is,
credits. Yeah. So that was my... for those folks who haven't seen it especially, I don't think I helped you understand it at all, but we'll get more into it.
The one thing I want to add about the end was that the way that they were able to escape, because Crosshair had them in his, for lack of a better word, crosshair, Omega just grabs a pistol and shoots him, and it disarms him, literally.
Right.
And it turns out that's the first time she ever shot a gun, and it was that effective. So that's why they're leaning on maybe she's got some kind of enhancement that is, like you said, we don't know. I mean, we just found out that she was one of the same as the Bad Batch, which they're calling them defective / enhanced clones because they're not the perfect marker or perfect replica of Jango's original sample. So
Right. In many ways, they seem kind of like X-Men in that they're all mutations, and yet all of them are highly combat relevant.
Right. They each have a certain, one particular strength that is super enhanced, like strength.
Wrecker is the bruiser of the crew. Tech has got the brilliant mind.
Right.
Hunter has the extra senses, and he's always like, "We're not alone." He said that multiple times throughout the episode, and then an off-screen character reveals themselves, and then Crosshair is the sharpshooter.
Right. Well, so let's just start talking right about Omega, because I think there's a lot of other things to go into, but she's kind of the linchpin in many ways.
Sure.
First of all, just wonderfully animated. We pulled up a picture of sort of the younger clones who we got to see in some earlier Clone Wars, as well as in some of the movies.
And even in this episode, we saw him a couple times walking down the corridor.
Yeah, and her face, she is very much like, she looks like the female sister of them.
Right.
And one thing I noticed was, you're right, it's very good sharpshooting.
Yes.
She's also very smart.
Yes.
And so I wonder if maybe she has could she have both Crosshair and Tech stuff? She follows Hunter all the time. She does that copying exactly he does. I
had the thought that she had she could have a similar skill set in a lesser form than on Avatar. She collects all of this stuff. She wasn't just one enhancement. She is all over, but she doesn't know what she has yet. I mean, hell, she could even be force sensitive. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was actually a question. James Hewings, a big fan of this and other Stranded Panda podcasts, wrote in and asked, could she be force sensitive? And that's actually something we've seen in the comments a bunch of times. Haley Hobbs had thought at first that she heard the force theme with her, but then later went back and was like, not so sure. But what do you all think? Could Omega be force sensitive?
I think it's entirely possible.
If she is, it puts a wrinkle into the whole saga that they never thought was possible, because and maybe that's the point now that they're figuring why they need to get her away from the eyes of Palpatine, because Palpatine finds out that you can clone a force sensitive.
Exactly. I'm glad you bring it up. Yeah. You get that throwaway line in Rise of Skywalker, the Sith knew about cloning technology, but if we were able to get that context through the series, that'd be great. Yeah.
And it'd be interesting because I know in some of the books, which are no longer canon, they established the idea that a clone can't be force sensitive, or that if it is often fundamentally unstable, and there's all this kind of stuff.
Interesting.
That for the most part, the shows and the movies have avoided. But it does feel like, to this point, there's never been any talk of force sensitivity. Even when some of the not-so-great Jedi were talking about why they didn't really regard the clones as important, they kind of offhand mentioned that they weren't really sort of full beings in the living force.
Right.
So there's a part of me that I kind of want the story to not be about Jedi and not be about force-sensitive people.
Right.
But if it is, I think you're right. That could also be a really interesting direction for it to go.
Yeah. I did want to mention about the kind of way we're introduced to Omega outside of that scene in the corridor. The first time that she gets some real FaceTime with all the members of the Bad Batches in that scene in the cafeteria, and we just get more. We get to understand how the regs treat and look at the Bad Batch. They actually have the audacity to call them the Sad Batch, even though they've got 100% success rate in their missions. So
right.
And she trial by fire. She becomes quick friends with Wrecker. And one by one, she's mimicking Hunter the entire time. It's just awesome to see how she really does get close to all the individual members, minus Crosshair.
And for those listening, regs are the standard clone troopers. They're the ones that are the formulaic copy of a copy of a copy.
Right.
And one detail I thought that was so interesting, because they did, as you both pointed out, so many great little details, is that when we've seen clones out in the field who are fighting with the Jedi, often they've started to differentiate themselves. They have different haircuts. They have shifted their voices a bit. They have different names.
Yeah.
The clones we see here all look exactly the same.
Correct.
And there's so much clearly where they were spending so much money on animation. That wasn't to save money. Like,
Right.
I think that's very intentionally to show these are not clone troopers who've been out fight. These are the ones who are either they're still on Camino because they've never really had the chance to individuate themselves, or they're the ones who are the most, like, they haven't had individuality yet, which I think is very significant because those are probably... I'm guessing that part of this is that Palpatine is not only afraid, and Tarkin are not only afraid of these 5, but we may start to be seeing that he's like, oh yeah, all these clones, even though they followed Order 66, they loved the Jedi, they fought with the Jedi, they came out with individuation, let's get rid of them.
Right, yeah.
And they even bring that up with Tarkin because that's the reason why he's there is pretty much to shut down the cloning facility because it's a lot more cost effective to just recruit people than to keep making clones.
Right. So what do you think about what we learned about kind of... I was joking earlier that the group we have is basically a D&D party. You know, you've got your like heavy warrior type in Wrecker. You've got your like the smart one, the wizard kind of in Tech. You've got a cleric healer type. What do you all think we learned about either individual character notes that you thought were cool, or just how the whole group works together?
Well, just speaking of the whole group working together, like coming off of those 4 episodes in the 7th season of Clone Wars again, like we got to see how functional they are as a like 4-team unit, and they are really are that perfect like D&D group as you described, but they really upped the ante like a couple of times. Like the first one that comes to my mind is when they're battling in the training facility and they use the live rounds on them, and Hunter throws the knife and Crosshair shoots the knife. Like that was just... I love the imagination behind it and the way it's just executed. The camera work, the choreography, again, and the fidelity of all these renders. There's hair movement, there's little articles of clothing that get caught in the wind, and the particle effects are all there. It's a 75-minute episode, so we get to go a lot of different places, but from the snow to the rain to the smoke and fire, it's all just incredible.
The visualization of the shockwave when the thing blew up, it was just like, wow.
Well, that's where I'm glad you all are on, because I've said before I'm not a visual person. Like I can appreciate the beauty of it, but I don't notice things like that. I'm so glad that you can point those out because, you know, to me, I just get so wrapped up in the stories.
Sure.
I think the degree to which they're using animation to tell, not just the early Clone Wars episodes, it looks like video game cutscenes. You know? Yeah. They're fine, and the story's often great, the acting's great, but it doesn't... The story isn't told through the visuals, and so I love hearing about these kind of things because there were so many moments I think where we got those kind of things, and I also love what you said about like the knife and the shooting because you know we're all MCU lovers as well. It's something we talk about a lot, and I think a lot of the times when the Avengers sort of most really became a team in my mind is things where like, you know, someone's ability to jump really high is accented by leaping off of Cap's shield. Sure.
Yeah.
And here their ability to be like, your talent and my talent we're going to put together to like some super thing. Yeah. It was such great team building.
Yeah. It was awesome.
In that regard.
Yeah. Well, Wrecker, I don't think we really learned anything new about Wrecker. Wrecker just kind of continues to be Wrecker. But I did like the fact that we got to spend more time with Echo. Echo got some really great scenes that I'll let you guys kind of get into if you want. But I wanted to highlight Tech. Like, Tech is quickly becoming one of my favorites. Just the way he runs down the battlefield, plants all his little things, and then knocks everybody out. I love characters like that. When
he made a little clicking button. Like, Jay Scotty's on
It's an
camera a
audio,
lot, so he forgets. You know, he's slumming it now.
I compared them to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles before, but Donatello is always my favorite. So Tech is quickly becoming my favorite in that regard as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really amazing what they're doing to really make them individual characters stand out. In the Bad Batch, we only had 4 episodes. There's a lot of else going on. And they were introduced as all kind of like one-note people. You know, like Wrecker smashes things. Hunter's really good at sensing things and is a leader. Tech is just the smart, annoying tech guy. And this, I felt like they really all got fleshed out some more. You know, Hunter is really the most like, not only is he like the good sensor and the leader, but he's thoughtful. Like, he's so clearly troubled. It feels like Crosshair is just like, Order 66, got to do it. Yeah. The rest of them are like, well, Hunter says we shouldn't do it. Except Tech somewhat also goes that way. But it was just wonderful to get to see, like, Wrecker in some ways I'm a little concerned about because we don't have any, and I think he'll get 12 episodes of him just being like, let's smash it, may get a little annoying.
I have a like speculation / theory. So obviously in this episode we saw that Crosshair was susceptible to having his programming, enhanced and having that inhibitor chip become stronger. You had that scene between Tech and Wrecker where Wrecker got really mad. He's like, I like to blow things up because I like to blow things up. Like, I wonder, are we going to see, like, one by one these members become, are they going to fall on different sides of the... We've already seen Crosshair go that way. I wonder if Wrecker could potentially go that way because he had that line too, like, we get to go fight some more and blow some more things up. Maybe the Empire's not so bad, so...
Right.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what you were saying, too, about Hunter being thoughtful. I mean, when they were on that mission, he goes back to Kamino because they wanted to save Omega because she warned him about Tarkin, about them being set up.
True.
And they were like, no. And then they get there. The reason why they found out about this was when there was a probe droid sent. So,
right.
They got caught, and then after that, it was sort of just like they got thrown in the brig, and they had to escape, and they used all their, abilities in themselves. Another thing that we got to point out, too, is that this is making it sound like it's a super serious show, which it is, but there were a lot of comedic moments in it that didn't feel forced. I mean, most of it was Wrecker saying something that, was like, well, why don't you like using hand signals? Why don't you learn hand signals? I know the hand signals.
Yeah.
Do like we did on Felucia. Well, why don't you just say that? It's just the interaction between them, and it sometimes when you have that, it'll seem forced. It didn't in here, so.
No, not at all.
The humor from them was great, and like, I love Grand Moff Tarkin, Admiral Tarkin, Captain Tarkin. He's always been one of my favorite characters, even though we don't get much of him in A New Hope, and I feel like it's often just remembered as Darth Vader being the bad guy, but Tarkin is fantastic in that.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like this actor both captures him well and has that, like, acerbic wit so well down.
Oh, yeah.
He was also quite funny.
That's Steven Stanton. He played him on Clone Wars as well.
Right.
And Rebels.
Right. Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot more. His character and Anakin were very, like, closely together in a lot of ways. And there's some great books that are canon that talk about Tarkin spending time with Vader.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to see Vader in this, but I'm curious if we'll get sort of some hints of Tarkin being the one who understands, like, this new person who's just shown up helping the Empire. He may have some memories of who that is.
Yeah, I think Tarkin's going to be the big bad, I guess, or he's going to be the focal point that we'll see on screen of the Empire for the most part. You're not going to see a lot of Palpatine or, like you just said, we're not going to see a lot of Vader. So I think Tarkin is going to be the guy that's going to be the, it's almost falling into like the A-Team trope that they thought this might be like, because the Bad Batch now is on their own, and we're going to have the Empire trying to find them because they're pretty much, they're deserters now. So
yeah, I'm guessing that Tarkin will be the big bad, and that Crosshair is going to be a antagonist for a while.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that eventually one of the missions is going to be, especially since Echo became part of the team because there was such a strong like all for one go rescue Echo. I imagine they're going to be placed in situations where they might be like fighting and have to kill Crosshair, and they'll refuse and really try to make the mission. Can we rescue Crosshair? Can we? And that hopefully by the end of this season, he's back with the team.
Right.
I'd love for it to go that way, but I don't know if I'm that optimistic.
That's possible. That's possible. It might be might still be a Bad Batch of 5 just with Omega instead. So we'll see.
Yeah.
So I think we talked a little bit, but let's just kind of touch on again. What do you all feel about seeing Kaylin Jarrus? We know him as Kaylin Jarrus, at least when that name got dropped.
When they said it was Caleb Doob, I'm just like, okay, great. They're bringing the Rebels character, and for the most part, they show flashbacks, and I'm not sure if it's in Rebels or if it's in the comic series of when this scene was already been shown. So it was actually cool to see it from the other angle, and it's like it was pretty much spot on the same, because you know that they're not going to make one thing not canon and canonize this, but it was as soon as he showed up on screen, it's like, oh crap, cool.
Yeah. And to me, it's so important because his character in Star Wars Rebels, I'm trying to go into too many spoilers for those who haven't seen it yet. We are going to be reviewing it on this podcast. But a major theme of his character is that he still has so much guilt about what happened to his master, and that he blames himself. And also that he has very negative feelings about clones.
Sure.
And part of what happens here is that Crosshair is trying to kill him. The rest of the clones, especially from Hunter, are trying to save him, and he can't trust them. Yeah. And I think for good reason. And so at the end is Hunter trying to be like, hey, come with me, we can help you, and him running away, which I thought was also pretty darn telling.
Yeah, I don't have the strong affinity to the character, but just again, I'll take the opportunity to highlight one of the things, like the fact that they set this on this ice planet, and the majority of the time you're spending with this character is close up shots on his face with his lightsaber there, and I was just continually impressed by, no matter where the lightsaber moved, they were always taking the color temperature into effect, and just the flesh was so incredibly animated. So
you think of some of those great scenes in the movies where the faces are lit only by their lightsabers.
Yes.
And it has that hell atmosphere to it.
Yeah, definitely.
I also it was just a small little detail, but there's a moment where Hunter is really worried, and Caleb, he's at this long ravine.
Right.
And Caleb jumped, and for a minute you see Hunter look like, oh god, he's trying to kill himself. Until you realize, what anyone who's been with a Jedi would know, this is an easy jump for him to leap over this ravine. To me, what that highlighted is that, for the most part, the Bad Batch haven't been with the Jedi.
Correct.
The way all the rest of them have. They've been kind of off on their own, doing their own thing.
It's a good pickup.
And Hunter hasn't seen Jedi do this thing 1,000 times before.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it was a pretty big ravine he crossed, too, or jumped across, so it wasn't like it was just a hop, skip, and a jump. It was a pretty good force leap.
Sure.
Yeah. We've kind of touched on it a bit, but let's kind of wrap up. How do y'all feel about getting to watch Order 66 from this side of things? And what else we learned about Order 66 here?
It was just another, instance of it, and it still is heartbreaking when you see it, and, but from a purely logistic standpoint, it was totally effective, but it's still just man, the Jedi got the raw deal on that. Even though they were jerks at the end of it there, they don't deserve to get mass killed off like that.
Yeah. It's as heartbreaking as it always is to see it go down, and no matter what medium it is. But we did mention, I was glad that the Jedi Master there, who was it?
Depa Billaba.
Yeah, I like the fact that she did not go down as easily. We got that montage in Revenge of the Sith where Ayla Secura in particular comes to mind. She got kind of gunned down fairly easily. So definitely appreciated seeing somebody put up a little bit of a fight, and the emotion was just so poignant.
Yeah, I think we haven't talked about it yet. The music in this episode was spot on with where it was. It was building up tension a lot of times, and it was building up dread, and it's a lot of times with Star Wars, the music is almost like the fourth character or the fourth part of it, because you don't recognize it, but then if you take it out, you're like, this is a wholly different scene now. So
there was that one moment when Emperor Palpatine is giving his speech. It's just the exact same audio we've heard before, but now he's giving, the speech is being broadcast to all the clones. And you can see all the other clones just start cheering and yelling. And there's actually a great line from Tech about, you still think they're not the regs aren't being programmed.
Right.
And they play the Imperial March for just a few bars, and it's just so perfectly done. Yeah,
and then there was that moment where Hunter and Crosshair were having their standoff, where they both had their sights aimed at each other. And then somebody in the room that we were watching, they whistled that whole...
It was me.
Yeah, and then I noticed that the music that immediately came into was actually evocative of kind of that Western theme, but it was very much appropriate for Star Wars.
It was that Marconi type feel to it.
I love it when, as much as the Star Wars universe can expand, when the music as well can incorporate other genres and still be appropriate. It's excellent.
Definitely. So we got to see Saw Gerrera on screen for a couple seconds. What'd y'all think of him?
They used the Clone Wars model, because he was on the Clone Wars first. They kept all the same stuff for the planet he was on, Onderon. I like the first thing when they show up there, because Onderon in canon is a very... there's a lot of primitive beasts there, and so one of the first things you see is the flying creature, and it's dark, and it's at night, and it's kind of a little overcast or foggy, and just his... it sounded... I looked this up, though, because it was the same actor that voiced him in the Clone Wars, but his inflection this time had a little bit more of the Forrest Whitaker Rogue One delivery to it. But I looked it up to check to see, because we didn't mention that Freddie Prinze Jr. did Caleb Doom, but they kind of de-aged his voice a bit. You could see it, you could hear it. He did sound a little old for a 10-year-old kid, but I know 10-year-olds... Most of them don't have deep voices, but you could tell it was Freddie Prinze Jr. But see, Saw Gerrera's character, bringing him in already, it's there's another tie to the past.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I just thought it was really well done in a way that, because it showed the character in a place kind of halfway between naive idealist we met early on and, very jaded, very cynical. But he has some of the same mannerisms. He has the same, he says to the clones, like, look, are you going to kill us? Are you going to do this terrible thing to us? And it really resonated for me the way Forrest Whitaker does that.
Yeah.
And it is kind of evocative of the one time we have seen him in live action as well in Rogue One. I did his interaction with Jyn Erso, and he's like, what will you become? Like, he presents these questions to our protagonist, and it's like, I like that through line there, that we know he becomes questionable in his tactics and his motives, but the fact that that's something that he continues to do, pose that question to our heroes.
That's a great catch. I hadn't even picked up on that. And I've been reaching out to a lot of people I know who watched it. And one thing I've heard, and I feel like having characters like Saw Gerrera like this really helps, is that I've spoken to a number of people who like Star Wars. They're big fans of the movies. Maybe they listen to this podcast. Maybe they haven't. But they haven't watched the Clone Wars. They haven't dived super deep.
Sure.
And they all really like this episode.
Oh, yeah.
And for fans, I'd be curious if where you stand on it. But I felt like they did such a good job of making it both, for the super lore people like ourselves, like really great, but also super accessible. Like there was a lot of exposition, but it didn't feel forced. Right. It didn't feel like painful. It just felt, these characters would talk to each other like this.
And the one thing we forgot to mention too, and it actually was a great way. It's literally the first thing you see after the Lucasfilm logo. The Clone Wars symbol pops up. And then it has like a slow burn, and it burns away to the Bad Batch, because this is technically, it's the sequel to the Clone Wars. Clone Wars are done, and this is the continuation of the story from the Bad Batch's point of view.
Which is also kind of I don't think this is a direct connection, but it's a fun similarity. Mandalorian, the TV show, a big theme of it is about, you won the war, can you win the peace?
Right.
And now this is kind of from now it's the other side won the war, but where are they going to go from there? And that's kind of actually a good, kind of our last final question I want to ask before bringing a bit of feedback. Where do you think we're going to go from here? We're not going to get into speculation. The Omega Fisto is not, I think, a thing that's been confirmed.
No. I think we're going to go to J19. It's the only thing I'm going to speculate on.
Yeah. So what do folks have guesses about what J19 might be, or what we're going to see from the rest of the story?
The only thing I read was that there was J19 was in a sector that Obi-Wan got Eeth Koth's location from in Revenge of the Sith in the Slukamai area. But since those characters... Obi-Wan is... I would be shocked if his guy was Obi-Wan, because he would not have known this close. So it had to be someone that they had beforehand.
Right.
It could be anybody. That's the point of speculation now. Who is... they throw that in there, and they know us as fans. Luckily, we only have to wait until Friday to hopefully find out. So.
Oh, is that the next episode out?
Yeah, it'll be on Fridays from now on.
Awesome. That's fantastic. What about you? Scotty, what are your thoughts on where we're going to go from here?
I don't really have a lot of guesses, kind of as like Brian's alluding to. It really could be anybody, but tech does give us at least the suggestion that the list of friends they have is relatively short. But with that being said, if there is an opportunity to possibly tie it into the Obi-Wan series that's in the work, I'm always open to... That's one of the great things about the synergy with Disney Plus, just being able to connect all these things and do it so well. I'd be excited to see it done that way. Excuse me.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't know what J19 is going to be. I think I'm almost certain we're going to go back to Kamino at some point. One thing I like is that we saw, the Kaminoans, both in the movie and in the Clone Wars TV show, were always clearly kind of very much working with Count Dooku, even working with Emperor Palpatine. But it always seemed like they weren't true believers. They were just, these are the guys who are paying us, let's get paid.
Yeah.
And here, I think, they're starting to sense the danger that, they get upset when Tarkin wants to use live fire in the exercise against the clones. Because they're like, but not for, humanitarian, it's these are our property. Don't damage our property. Yeah. And I feel I think at some point in the show, we're going to see the Empire shutting down what's happening on Kamino.
Very likely.
Oh, yeah.
Probably not with just paperwork. And so I like that the Kaminoans are being presented as this kind of morally gray. They're not going to tell the Empire about Omega. So yeah, I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Let me just read one last quick piece of feedback we got, and then we'll kind of move on.
Cool.
And this is just also a reminder to all the folks who are listening. Definitely please write in. I'll tell you how to do that in a minute. But getting this feedback is going to be a great part of us going through with the show. So TJ Stratford wrote in, loved the Clone Wars narration in the beginning, which, it was the same narrator who, as someone pointed out, the actor had a stroke.
Tom Kane.
Tom Kane, thank you. And so he may have done other things, but this may be one of the last, if not the last thing he did. So, and hearing his narration, the same narrator we got from the Clone Wars, was just such a great through line. Mm-hmm. They also rate Baby Caleb Doom, aka Kanan Jarrus. Okay, I kept getting Caleb and Kanan mixed up. That's why. Thank you. I'm terrible with names. Everyone who knows this show knows that. It was awesome. Illustrates his mistrust of clones and explains his treatment of Rex in Rebels. Saw Gerrera. I love how they made him look like a good blend of his appearance in Clone Wars and in Rebels. Definitely helped show the passage of time. Mostly TJ is just pointing out how smart we all were. Because, great points, TJ. So torn
TJ's great.
Yeah. So torn about Crosshair. On one side, he's such a dick, but also, I know it's not really his fault. Very interested to see what they do with him going forward. Overall, great first episode. I thought they were just going to be half-hour episodes, so I was pleasantly surprised this one was an hour long. This is going to be a wonderful bridge between Clone Wars and Rebels, so pumped for next week.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think even because we had the group we have here, we had people that didn't watch much Star Wars stuff, and then they had us, and I think everyone overall enjoyed it a lot. And so I think that this is going to be a great entry point for some people to also then jump back and watch the older stuff now, because even though it's animated, it is so, like I said, we've had to say a couple of times when we were watching it, I can't believe this is an animated show.
It's worth mentioning as we're wrapping up here, like, there were multiple times where we just had shots in space of, like, a shuttle flying by in front of a planet, and I'm like, you could have told me this is, like, out of one of the live action movies, and I would not have argued you at all.
Yeah, I mean, the line between animation and CGI, I think, is at this point just fully blended. And that kind of thing. And it's funny, one of my concerns was, the Clone Wars is fantastic, but I've often talked about how the Clone Wars is a kid's show, and sometimes it treats these topics of incredible nuance more like a kid's show. And I think of Batman the Animated Series as kind of the gold standard of, it's a kid's show, but it really deals with things with nuance. Yeah. This, to me, was, in that regard, so much better.
I think I hopefully think we've learned as Star Wars fans now that when the first thing you see when the credits roll, the name Dave Filoni, it's pretty much a given that it's going to be quality work.
True that.
He's been doing this for a long time, and it's shown lately that it's just, he's got the Midas touch. So
yeah, and I think one thing that you talked about how this is like a great entry point. I also think it's just such a great, like, we're coming back. Mandalorian was so good, especially like the post-schools. Like, there's very few Star Wars fans, I think, who love all three post-schools. And we can, some people love one, some people love another, don't like one. But there was just, the Mandalorian did so much to kind of just bring people back and be like, hey, wait a minute, let's kick the toxic nonsense out. Let's remember why we love this fandom so much. Yeah. And and that was like, okay, that was one great thing. But we have so much new content coming soon, and this to me was such a great, like, okay, yeah, the Mandalorian's not a fluke. It's not a one-off. We can even do animation. We can do, like, Mandalorian is not a kid's show. This, I think, I would happily let a 10-year-old watch, but it's also just much more nuanced than a lot of kids' shows can be. So
agreed.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, TJ Stratford, thank you so much. Great points. And any other last comments you want to make before we wrap up?
No, I mean, it was a great entry point to the show. Great start. Fully entertained, fully just loved it. So
great.
I would echo those sentiments. It was a great way to spend May the 4th. So
yeah,
happy Star Wars Day.
Happy Star Wars Day, everyone. And I want to let you each talk about kind of what you're all doing. And I want to start by saying this podcast is being done in partnership with another awesome podcast on the Stranded Panda Podcast Network, Animation Deliberation. Jay Scotty is one of the hosts of that. Zuhair Ali, who will be joining us for later episodes, is the other co-host. Because it's animation, they all agreed that I definitely knew I wanted them on. Yeah. We're mostly going to post these on Star Wars Universe Podcast, but definitely check out what they're doing on Animation Deliberation. We want this to be kind of a showcase for all the awesome stuff they're doing. Yeah. And they're just finishing up another show that was very popular. Just Scotty, talk about what's happening on your podcast.
Yeah, we're very fortunate in our timing here. We're still a pretty new podcast, but there is an excellent series that just came out on Amazon, Invincible. So it is an adaptation from Robert Kirkman's Image comic that has been long-running and critically acclaimed, and for good reason. It's just such an excellent, excellent show. If you're a fan of animation, comic book stuff, this is right up your alley. And as far as Animation Deliberation goes, my partner there, Zuhair, it's been an awesome, awesome run so far, and really excited for this opportunity to get to lean into our partnership with the network and get to have these great discussions with folks like yourself.
Yeah, to me, if you're just listening to this podcast, definitely go to strandedpanda.com. There's so many other great podcasts there about the MCU, DC, animation, Star Trek. But honestly, I think one of the best things is the way we can collaborate. The way we can realize when, like, these universes overlap or interests overlap or, you know, superhero ethics and DC universe can do things together. So I'm super excited to have you all on. As I said, I'm a total curmudgeon when it comes to the visual art. You all pick up on things with animation that I just will never see. And then we're also going to have, you know, 4 of us on the podcast can be a little much, but with a lot of episodes coming up, we'll probably rotate in a lot. And Brian, with your extensive knowledge and great perspective on things, you're going to be a frequent guest here as well. For folks who want to find more about what you're doing, where can they do that?
Pretty much, I'm the guy that guests on a lot of the shows on Stranded Panda. We do the Star Wars book club on this network as well, but I basically hang out. I'm a moderator at the chat group over on Facebook, and we talk a lot over there. So just, if you see me on there or whatever, hit me up and we can chat.
Yep. We will be bringing back the book club. Brian thinks that the totally flimsy excuse that he had his face cut open for surgery should somehow excuse him for the fact that he couldn't read the books, but no, yeah, totally fine. There's been a lot going on, but we will be bringing back the Star Wars book clubs, and we will at some point do episodes about Rise of Skywalker and Solo. I may have to excuse myself from them so that we can say some positive things about them, but we have at least some people who like those movies, some people who very much don't, and we'll have some nuanced conversations. But yeah, so to you fans, thank you so much for being a part of this. We totally had to find Stranded Panda. You can find everything about the podcast that I do, this podcast, and superhero ethics at theethicalpanda.com. And if you want to give us feedback, you can go find us just right there. You can email us, theethicalpanda@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook or Twitter, again, just search for The Ethical Panda, and you'll find us on any of those platforms. We'd love to get your feedback. To me, it is so exciting with new content, and I just want to hear other people's. And that's, if you're excited, if you're curious, if you have no idea what's going on, if you don't like it, if you just think everything should be live action, let us know that too. All the comments, let's have a conversation. No toxicity, just awesome fans getting to share opinions, even when we disagree. Totally great. Oh, yeah, just got to throw in more your contact info, go ahead too.
If you want to submit feedback to the Animation Deliberation podcast, you can do that at animationdeliberationpodcast@gmail.com. And for myself, if you want to, see my artwork on Instagram or anything like that, it's just J Scotty for real. JSCOTTY 4 REEL.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you both so much. It's great to have you be a part of this. And to you fans, last thing I'll ask is, we really want to help more fans find this conversation. You know, there's a lot of great Star Wars content out there, but I think we have a little bit of a different focus, and that we're not going to go too much into the tech details. We really want to focus on the story and the characters. If you like this, if you want more people in the conversation, more people to hear it, definitely share it with your friends, tell them about it, send them the link. But honestly, the best thing you can do is go to iTunes or somewhere like that and give us a 5-star review. Even if it's not 5-star, all reviews are great. Tell us what you think. Tell us what we can improve. Tell us what you like. But especially those 5-star reviews, that sends us up the search charts. There's a whole bunch of people who are going to be punching in the Bad Batch into podcast searches. The more reviews we get, the more you tell us what you like, the more we go up there, we get more listeners, we grow this community, and the conversations just get better and better. So, on behalf of myself, our 2 great guests, Zuhair Ali, who'll be with us later, thank you all so much, and may the Force be with you.
Roger, Roger.
I need a new podcast host.